It has been recommended to me that I look at voter registration data, so I did, and here is what I found. 31 states and the District of Columbia have their voter registration data available. Using 272 WINS map generator, I have highlighted all the states that have this data available in red. For my series of videos, I have been looking at 6 states in particular: Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. Only 3 of these states provide voter registration data. An added complication is finding a voter registration breakdown for states, or preferably by county. I have spent hours searching. There seems to be no place aggregating this data. I did, however, find a county breakdown of Florida for 2016. This data comes from the Florida state government. I have the general election breakdown provided by Wikipedia, which gets its data from Florida Department of State Division of Elections. As you will notice, in the general election we have Clinton, Trump, Johnson, Stein, and write-ins. In the state registration, we have Republican, Democrat, minor, and none. When we total up all registrations, we get almost 13 million registered voters. In the general election, we end up with 9.4 million total votes cast. 3.6 million registered voters did not vote. That is 27% of registered voters are inactive. Some of this 27% is people who have passed away and not been removed from the system. Part of it is people moving and being in the system for 2 states. More importantly though, what percentage of registered Republicans, Democrats, minor, or unaffiliated did not vote? I do not know. The 27% could theoretically be a lot of registered Republicans sitting home. This creates a massive margin of error to begin with. The second problem is that being registered for a party is opt-in. This means that just because you are a registered Republican does not mean you have to vote Republican. In addition, just because you voted Democrat for the president does not mean you vote Democrat down ballot either, so that voter registration cannot predict down ballot races. So the question is, what percentage of each of these categories voted for which candidate? Without these 2 pieces of information, I cannot use the data, especially for battleground states. For any non-battleground states, I also would not need this data to explain why a candidate did or did not win. People who directly compare the general election data against the voter registration data without considering both problems I outlined, are making major assumptions. Since this is modeling that only Democrats vote for Democrats without crossover, this leads us to think that 410,000 registered Democrats sat out. However, more people voted Republican than there are registered, so the 40,480 could be assumed to be independents filling in. While this might seem fair, what we have done is assume that the vast majority of independents did not vote. That's the misleading part of using this data. But we'll go forward with this at the moment anyways. Did the voting registration predict the correct president would win Florida? No. It predicts Hillary wins by a margin of 340,000 votes. In reality, Trump won by a margin of 113,000 votes. This is an error of almost 500,000 votes. Florida has 67 counties. How accurate is this on who won which county? It predicted Hillary would win these 30 counties. In actuality, she won only 9 counties. This table is the 21 counties she lost. I highlighted in blue how much she led by in voter registration, and how much Donald Trump won by in pink. In total, this was an error of 250,000 votes on these counties. Trump won all the counties he had a lead in voter registration, so in the end it got 46 counties correct, which is an accuracy of 69%. To further show what is going on, I made this graph to compare the general election to the voter registration directly. At 100%, the registered voters match the votes during the election for that party in that county. For example, in Bay County, there were 61,441 registered voters, and during the election, Trump received 62,194 votes. Dividing the two yields 101.2%. To be above 100% means that the party was underrepresented, to be below 100% means the party was overrepresented, so this graph shows that on average, Democrats were overrepresented by at least 8%. Meaning there's way more registered Democrats than Democrat voters. Republicans appear to be underrepresented, but this is unlikely true. In the election, they are overestimated as well, and end up getting additional independent votes to make up for it. I would analyze further, making more interesting graphs. As you know, the accuracy of the data does not matter to begin with, since we're based on a giant and false assumption. Even if the assumption was true that the Republicans and Democrats received votes only from the registered voters on their party, it is too inaccurate to measure battleground states with any certainty. I found this table from Thirdway. In my companion video, I explain the changes I made and why I made them, so this is the table I will be using for this section. We will now analyze and see how accurate it is. Hillary should have won California, Colorado, D.C., Florida, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. Trump should have won Alaska, Arizona, Iowa, and New Hampshire. This table also has Democrats beating Republicans by 12 million registered voters, or by 44%. This should be an easy landslide then. Instead, Trump ended up winning Florida, Kentucky, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. He also ended up losing New Hampshire. So, for 2016 at the state level, it gets 10 states right, and DC, this is a 65% accuracy rate. Registered Democrats are overrepresented by 5.8 million, or by 17.3%, while registered Republicans are almost equal to voters. Looking at the states more, we already discussed Florida. The most inaccurate states are Kentucky, Louisiana, New York, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. In Kentucky, Democrats had a lead of almost 360,000 registered voters, but ended up losing by 575,000 votes. I made this table to show the error in votes, using Kentucky as an example to explain my work. First column was how much the Democrats were up by in registration, second column was how they did in the election, which was losing by about 575,000. The error is adding these two up, or an error of 930,000 votes. The overrepresentation is how many registered Democrats there were in comparison to how many turned out. In this case, over 1 million registered Democrats did not vote for their party. They were overrepresented by about 170%. Jumping to the totals, although Democrats had 5.6 million more registered voters, they still lost 4 out of 5 states, and end up with only a net positive of 546,337 votes. They were on average overrepresented by 46%. I do not know why the discrepancies are so large in these states. However, this article about Louisiana precincts covers some of the interesting phenomena. A lot of people are registered as Democrats in the state, but vote Republican every year. After I have removed these 5 states as outliers, the remaining states and DC look more accurate for this election. I can see why people fall into this fallacy. As I kept researching for this video, I found 2 graphs. The first is voter registration provided by Pew Research, the second is more recent years provided by Gallup Poll. There is differences in their reported numbers, but I shall use these graphs to make my final observations and points. My first observation is that voter registration is fairly inflexible. As you can see, the vast majority of people identified as Democrat from 1940 until 1980. Keep this graph in mind. I'm now going to show you each president during this time period. Notice that the Democrat presidents are not winning with huge margins. Both Eisenhower and Nixon win massive landslides. The only Democrat president to get a landslide in this period is Johnson. In 1980, Democrats still had the advantage when Reagan also won a Republican landslide. To me, this shows that the data was always and still is skewed Democrat, just to a much lesser degree now. The second observation is going back to the down ballot races mentioned earlier. My first video was covering the 2020 election and I noticed a very odd phenomena I could not explain. I'll tally the results on the right as we go along. First, the Democrats won the presidency, and 3 Senate seats after the Georgia special elections. Next, Republicans made 14 gains in House, going from 199 to 213 members. They also gained an additional governorship, They also made substantial gains in the state legislature House and Senate seats. This mix is odd for an election year to have. When adding the rest of the seats from the chambers not participating, Republicans have a total of 4,027 House and Senate members. This translates to majorities in 62 of 99 chambers between the states. How do they have so many? Looking back at this graph, consider that since 2010, the Republicans have been gaining to this crazy 2/3 ownership in the down-ballot races, which would be the halfway point of Obama's first term until present. I find this surprising and in stark contrast to the presidential races. I'll be charting this out more in a video soon, but voter registration data cannot explain this paradox either. The final observation is the emergence in third parties over the decades, a significant rise, and this troubles me. If this is true, where are our third parties? I looked at state elections from 1828 until present in an earlier video. Third parties used to win states. Here is a table of every year starting in 1828 that third parties did this. As you can see, about every 20 to 30 years, a third-party candidate wins a state or more until 1968. I made this second table for the strong third-party candidates after 1968. None of them win a single state. Most telling is Ross, who gets a higher voter percentage than most of the parties before him, but his votes are so spread out that he wins nothing. The Gallup data is telling me that since 1992, independents have been consistently the largest group in politics, and since 2012, they have been above 40% of registered voters, a historic high. Where are our third parties? Why does the best candidate for third parties in 20 years only get about 5 million votes? I have more research to do. I find this to be strange. I hope this clears up the problems with this data set and why I cannot justify a Democrat winning Pennsylvania or another state because of registration numbers. If anyone has the missing data, the active voters in the November elections and the party crossover vote for the election, that could prove very useful and would help me be able to evaluate the data more. As things stand, I cannot use this data to predict battleground states. The error margin on these is too big to account for swing states with enough precision. Finally, in my next video, I'll be discussing counties. The video has become much larger than anticipated and might be broken in half. I'm looking to compile all of my findings throughout this series. Look forward to it, and see you all next time.